एवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादां सर्वललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णकृष्णाय भूतले श्रीमद्भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिन्नित्यनामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणि प्रचारिणे विशेषशून्यादिपाशाद्यदेशतारिणे श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत वेदांत श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे सर्वशास्त्रार्थी पीयूष सर्ववेदैक सत्फल सर्वसिद्धांत रत्नाढ्य सर्वलोकैकत्रिप्रद सर्वभागवत प्राण श्रीमद्भागवत प्रभो ललिध्वांतोदितादित्य श्रीकृष्ण परिवर्तिता परमानंद पाठाय प्रेमावशक्षराय ते सर्वदा सर्वसेव्य श्रीकृष्णाय नमोस्तुमे मदेक बंधो मत्संगी मद्गुरो मन्महाधना मन्निस्तारक मद्भाग्य मदानंद नमोस्तुते साधु साधुतादाय नतिनिचोच्चताकर आनमंशगताशेन मां प्रेमणा हृत्कंठयो स्फुरा ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय 2.7.33 to 2.7.46. 633. क्रीडन् वने निशिनिशाकररश्मिगौर्याम् रासोऽन्मुखकल्पदायतमूर्च्छितेन उद्दीप्तस्मररुजां व्रजभृद् वधूनां भर्तुर्हरिष्यति शिरो धनदानुगस्य. When the Lord was engaged in his pastimes of the rasa dance in the forest of Vrindavan, enlivening the sexual desires of the wives of the inhabitants of Vrindavan, by sweet and melodious songs, a demon of the name Shankachuda, a rich follower of the treasurer of heaven, Kuvera, kidnapped the damsels, and the Lord severed his head from his trunk. Murchitena, melodious music. Madhvacharya quotes from a music-related scripture, Gandharva. Morshana is a particular combination of the seven swaras. Tatra Rasalilaya Saha Purikalilam Ekikritya Varnanam. This is a description of the Lord's pastime of Holi along with Rasalila. Combined description. Bhavishyati Dinantaram Bhavam. This will take place in the future. Shankachudavadamapi Rasa Sannidhyat Tat Sahityenaivaha. The killing of Shankachuda takes place at a time close to the Rasa pastime. We should carefully note that statements described here are the statements of Brahmaji to Narada. I mean, he was speaking to Narada of events that could happen in the future during the advent of Lord Krishna. The pastimes of the Lord are known to the experts who are able to see past, present, and future. And Brahmaji, being one of them, foretold what would happen in the future. The killing of Shankachuda by the Lord is a more recent incident after the Rasa Leela, not exactly a simultaneous affair. So, because the killing of Shankachuda is close to the Rasa Leela pastime, takes place very soon after the Rasa Leela pastime. It did not happen at the same time because then it would be a Rasabhas. So, because it is close to Rasa Leela, both of them have been put together by Lord Brahma here. In the previous verses, we have seen also that the Lord's engagement in the affairs of the forest fire was described along with his pastimes of punishing the Kaliya snake. And similarly, the pastimes of the Rasa dance and the killing of Shankachuda are also described here. So the idea is that extinguishing the forest fire and killing the Kaliya snake did not happen simultaneously, even though they have been described together by Lord Brahma here. The adjustment is that all these incidents would take place in the future, after the time when it was being foretold by Brahmaji to Narada. The demon Shankachuda was killed by the Lord during his pastimes on Holika Purnima in the month of Phalguna. And the same incident is still commemorated in India by the burning of an effigy of Shankachuda one day prior to Holika Purnima, the day on which the festival generally known as Holi is celebrated. Generally, the future appearance and the activities of the Lord or his incarnations are foretold in the scriptures. And thus, the pseudo-incarnations are unable to cheat persons who are in knowledge of the events as they are described in the authoritative scriptures. Where is this effigy? Does this take place in Bihar? Burning an
In
effigy of
North
Shankar?
India, different pastimes. Holika Dahan is Hiranyakashipu is one of the sister who wanted to burn Prahlad Maharaj, putting him in on her lap. So she is burned on that day, a day before Holi.
But it looks like this is also there.
Yeah.
In different parts of India, it may be different.
Yeah.
Text 34 to 35. ये च प्रलम्बखरदर्दुर केशरिष्ट मल्लेभकंस यवनाः कपिपौण्ड्रखाद्याः अन्ये च शाल्वकुजबल्वलदन्तवक्त्र सप्तोक्षशम्बरविदूरथरुक्मिमुख्याः ये वामृधे समितिशालिन आत्तचापाः काम्भोजमत्स्यकुरुसृञ्जयकैकयाद्याः यास्यन्त्यदर्शनमलं बलपार्थभीमव्याजाह्वयेन हरिणा निलयं तदीयम्. All demoniac personalities like Pralamba, Dhenuka, Baka, Keshi, Arishta, Chanura, Mushtika, Ulayapida elephant, Kamsa, Kala Yavana, Narakasura, and Poundraka, great marshals like Shalva, Gurida monkey, and Balvala, Dantavakra, the seven bulls, Shambara, Viduratha, and Rukmi, as also great warriors like Kamboja, Matsya, Kuru, Srinjaya, and Kekaya, would all fight vigorously, either with the Lord, Hari, directly, or with him under his names of Baladeva, Bhima, Arjuna, etc. Baladeva, Arjuna, Bhima, etc. And the demons thus being killed would attain either the impersonal Brahmajyoti or his personal abode in the Vaikuntha planets. 34 and 35 are together, but they are numbered together here. ये च परमदारयः ते सर्वे हरिणा हेतुभूतेन तदीयं निलयम् अदर्शनं दर्शन अयोग्यं वैकुण्ठम् अलं यास्यन्ति इति उत्तरेणान्वयम्. Pralamba and others, all of them, they, because of Lord Hari, they would attain the abode Vaikuntha, which is invisible and which is the Lord's own abode. Some of them would be killed by Balabhadra. Some would be killed by Bhima, Arjuna, and so on. Some by Pradyumna, some by Muchukunda. All of these activities are divine. बलपार्थेति दैत्य मोक्षदायित्व लक्षणया सर्व असाधारण शक्तिया तेषु आवेशात्. The Supreme Lord had empowered Bhima, Arjuna, and so on with the power, with his extraordinary, unique power of granting liberation to the Daityas. When the Supreme Lord himself sees, that is the primary reason for the Supreme Lord's abode. Otherwise, they are empowered by, Arjuna, Bhima, and so on are empowered to also grant this. Kechidalam adarshanam brahmalayam, kechittu tadiyam nilayam iti vibhedyam. Some of them attain the invisible abode, which is merging into the impersonal destination. And some of them, they attain the Lord's personal abode. एवं अति माधुर्य अधिकार वृंदावनीय लीलाः किंचित व्यासेन प्रोच्य. Now, having elaborately, with some slight elaboration, having described his pastimes in Vrindavan, because they are excessively sweet. Anya asuravadha lilaha samasena eva uddishati dvabhyam. It then indicates, in summary, his pastimes of killing the asuras in 2 verses. Adarshanam sayujyam. The word adarshanam indicates that some of them attained sayujya. So some of them, such as Pralamba Khara, Khara is Dhenuka, Kapi, the monkey is Dvivida, Balvala, Rukmi, they were killed by Balabhadra. Kamboja and others were killed by Bhima, Arjuna, and so on. Shambara was killed by Pradyumna, Yavana was killed by Kala Yavana was killed by Muchikunda. Saptokshna. Saptokshna refers to the 7 bulls, correct. The 7 bulls, they were subdued by the Lord, and later on they would attain the Lord's abode. Atra Pralamba Kharadayaha Sayujyam. Pralamba, Dhenuka, and so on, they attain Sayujyam. Paundraka Dantavakradayaha Vaikuntham. Paundraka, Dantavakra, and so on, they would attain Vaikuntha. The logic for this would be explained later on. It's in the chat box. Liberation merging into the Lord, merging into his impersonal effulgence. That's what it means. Brahma Sayujya. All manifestations in both the material and spiritual worlds are demonstrations of the different potencies of Lord Krishna. The personality of Godhead, Baladev, is his immediate personal expansion, and Bhima, Arjuna, etc. are his personal associates. The Lord would appear, and he does so whenever he appears with all his associates and potencies. Therefore, the rebellious souls, like the demons and demoniac men mentioned by names like Pralamba, would be killed either by the Lord himself or by his associates. All these affairs will be clearly explained in the 10th canto. But we should know well that all the above mentioned living entities killed would attain salvation either by being merged in the Brahmajyoti of the Lord or being allowed to enter into the abodes of the Lord called Vaikunthas. This has already been explained by Bhishma, the first canto. Yam Miha Niriksha Adagata Swarupam 1.9.39. All persons who participated in the battle of Kurukshetra, battlefield of Kurukshetra, or otherwise with the Lord or with Baladev, etc., would benefit by attaining spiritual existence according to the situation of their minds at the time of death. Those who recognize the Lord would enter Vaikuntha, and those who estimated the Lord as only a powerful being would attain salvation by merging into the spiritual existence of the impersonal Brahmajyoti of the Lord. But every one of them would get release from material existence. Since such is the benefit of those who played with the Lord inimically, one can imagine what would be the position of those who devoutly serve the Lord in a transcendental relationship with Him. It's 36. Kalena milita dhyam avamrishyandrinam stoka yusham swanigamo matadura para avirhitastvanu yugam sahi satyavat Vedadrumam vitapasho vibhajishyati sma. The Lord himself, in his incarnation as the son of Satyavati Vyasadeva, will consider his compilation of the Vedic literature to be very difficult for the less intelligent persons with short lives, and thus will divide the tree of Vedic knowledge into different branches according to the circumstances of the particular age. Vyasavataramaha Anuyugam, according to the Yuga. Herein, Brahma mentions the future compilation of Srimad Bhagavatam for the less intelligent persons of the Kali age. As explained in the first canto, the less intelligent persons of the age of Kali would be not only short-lived, but also perplexed with so many problems of life due to the awkward situation of the godless human society. Advancement of material comforts of the body is activity in the mode of ignorance according to the laws of material nature. The real advancement of knowledge means progress of knowledge in self-realization. But in the age of Kali, the less intelligent men mistakenly consider the short lifetime of 100 years, now factually reduced to about 40 to 60 years, to be all in all. They are less intelligent because they have no information of the eternity of life. They identify with the temporary material body existing for 40 years and consider it the only basic principle of life. Such persons are described as equal to the asses and bulls. But the Lord, as the compassionate Father of all living beings, imparts unto them the vast Vedic knowledge in short treatises, like the Bhagavad Gita, and for the graduates, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Puranas, and the Mahabharata are also similarly made by Vyasadeva, or the different types of men in the modes of material nature. But none of them are independent of the Vedic principles. The Puranas, Mahabharata, they're all based on the teachings of the four Vedas. Something in the chat box. Those who recognize the Lord would enter Vaikuntha. What is the meaning of recognized? Recognized the Supreme Lord's nature as the master of all living entities, and so on. 37. Devad Vishamnikamavartmani Nishthitanam Urbhirmayena Vihitavhiradrishyaturbhi Lokan Khnatam Mati Vimoham Apipralobham Vesham Vidhaya Bahubhashyata Aupadharmyam. When the atheists, after being well versed in the Vedic scientific knowledge, annihilate inhabitants of different planets, flying unseen in the sky on well-built rockets prepared by the great scientist Maya, the Lord will bewilder their minds by dressing himself attractively as Buddha and will preach on sub-religious principles. Buddhavataramaha. Devadvisham. The envious of the Devas. Nigamavartmani Vedamargi Nishtitanam Nitaram Sitanam. But they are fixed on the pathway of the Vedas. Tad Balena cha Purvihi, Puribhi. And by the strength of being fixed on the Vedas, they have all these powers. Therefore, Lord Buddha will entice them and teach them Upadharmya, Pashanda Dharma, anti-Vedic teaching. Kali Visheshe Avataram Sri Buddha Maha. This is an incarnation of Sri Buddha in a specific Kali Yuga. Asmin Kalo Devadvisham Tadrishyatva Ashravanat. In this Kali Yuga, we do not hear of Buddhists doing this. So we understand this took place in some other Kali Yuga. This incarnation of Lord Buddha is not the same Buddha incarnation we have in the present history of mankind. Means in this Kali Yuga. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the Buddha incarnation mentioned in this verse appeared in a different Kali Yuga. In the duration of life of one Manu, there are more than 72 Kali Yugas. And in one of them, the particular type of Buddha mentioned here would appear. Lord Buddha incarnates at a time when the people are most materialistic and preaches common sense religious principles. See, if you look at this particular word, Buddha, the Buddha of Bhagavatam 2.7.27. Why did he appear? Because there were those who took shelter of the Vedas, but they are averse to the demigods and so on. Devadvisham. See, they are envious of the devotees of the Lord. And they're harming others. Simply disturbing and killing different people, different worlds. So Lord Buddha appears and he speaks very attractively. He dresses in a particular manner and he will teach sub-religious principles. Aupadharmya. In the current Kali Yuga, this did not happen. Something similar happened. In the current Kali Yuga, people were the Karmakanda population, very much obsessed with following the Vedas. That part was nice. But unfortunately, they decided to harm animals in the name of Vedic sacrifice. So here also they were unnecessarily engaging in himsa, violence. So therefore Lord Buddha appears. Such ahimsa is not a religious principle itself, but is an important quality for persons who are actually religious. It is a common sense religion because one is advised to do no harm to any other animal or living being because such harmful actions are equally harmful to him who does the harm. But before learning these principles of non-violence, one has to learn two other principles, namely to be humble and to be prideless. Amanitvam, madambhitvam, ahimsa. That's where Prabhupada is getting this from. Unless one is humble and prideless, one cannot be harmless and non-violent. And after being non-violent, one has to learn tolerance and simplicity of living. Amanitvam, adambhitvam, ahimsa, kshantir, arjavam. One must offer respects to the great religious preachers and spiritual leaders. Acharya, upasanam. And also train the senses for controlled action. Acharya, upasanam, shaucham, stairyam, atma vinigraha, indriyartheshu, vairagyam, anahankara evacha. Learning to be unattached to family and home and to render devotional service to the Lord. At the ultimate stage, one has to accept the Lord and become his devotee. Otherwise, there is no religion. In religious principles, there must be God in the center. Otherwise, simple moral instructions are merely sub-religious principles, generally known as upadharma, or nearness to religious principles. Upadharma means adherence to upadharma. The Lord Buddha would teach that. Text 38. Yarhyālayeshvapi satam na harih kathasyuh pashandino dvijajana vishalamrite va swaha swatha vashad iti sma girona yatra shasta bhavishyati kale Bhagavan yugante. Thereafter, at the end of Kali Yuga, when there exists no topics on the subject of God, even at the residences of so-called saints and respectable gentlemen of the three higher castes, and when the power of government is transferred to the hands of ministers elected from the low-born Shudra class or those less than them, and when nothing is known of the techniques of sacrifice even by word, at that time the Lord will appear as a supreme chastiser. So they will not even know these words. Swaha, Swadha, Vashat. These are all used in Vedic hymns. Swaha is used when you perform sacrifices. Swadha, you bring in ingredients. Vashat, the altar of sacrifice. These words are actually used in the procedures for performing these sacrifices, but they will not even know this much. Okay, wait. Kalki Avatar Maha. This is Kalki Avatar. Yada satamapi alayeshu griheshu hare katha nasyu. When even in the residences of the saints, there is no Harikatha. Parivarnikah pashandinasyu. And the members of the higher three varnas become pashandis. Pashandi means those who reject Vedic authority. Shudrasya rajana hasyu. When Shudras become kings, tada kalki rupena kale shasta bhavishyati. Then, in the form of Lord Kalki, the Supreme Lord will appear to chastise these persons in Kali Yuga. अत्र च ब्रह्मन्नारद संवादात् प्राग भाविनः वराह आदयः मन्वन्तरावतारस्तु भूता भाविनश्च धन्वन्तरि परशुरामौ तदा वर्तेते श्री रामादयस्तु भाविनः तत्र तु क्वचित् भूतादि निर्देशः छान्दसे इति द्रष्टव्यम्. In this conversation between Brahma and Narada, Varaha and others had appeared in the past, their past. The Manvantara avatars, they had appeared in the past, they would appear in the future. Dhanvantari and Parshurama were contemporary. See, Rama and others were going to appear in the future. Sometimes he uses words in the past tense, but that is his license as a Vedic authority to do so. Satam chaturvarnya acharavatam alayeshu ashrameshu yadi harikata nasu. Srila Jiva Goswami says the saints here are those whose conduct is within the principles of chaturvarnya, the four varnas. Ateva teshu traivarnika pashinidam syu. Because they are not hearing the message of Lord Hari, therefore the Trivarnikas would become Pashandis. And the Shudras, up to the Mlechas, would become kings. The symptoms of the worst conditions of the material world at the last stage of this age called Kali Yuga are stated here. The common substance of such conditions is godlessness. Even the so-called saints and higher castes of the social orders, generally known as the Dvijajanas, or the twice-born, will become atheists. As such, all of them will practically forget even the holy name of the Lord, what to speak of his activities. The higher castes of society, namely the intelligent class of men guiding the destinies of the social orders, the administrative class of men guiding the law and order of the society, and the productive class of men guiding the economic development of the society, must all be properly well-versed in knowledge of the Supreme Lord, knowing factually his name, qualities, pastimes, entourage, paraphernalia, and personalities. The saints and the higher castes or orders of the society are judged by their proportion of knowledge in the science of God or Tattvajnana, and not by any kind of birthright or bodily designations. Such designations, without any knowledge of the science of God and practical knowledge of devotion service, are considered to be all decorations of dead bodies. And when there is too much inflation of these decorated dead bodies in society, that develops so many anomalies in the progressive, peaceful life of the human being. Because of the lack of training or culture in the upper section of the social orders, they are no more to be designated as the Dvijajanas or the twice-born. The significance of being twice-born has been explained in many places in this great literature. And again, one is reminded herewith that birth executed by the sex life of the father and mother is called animal birth. But such animal birth and progress of life on the animal principles of eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating without any scientific culture of spiritual life is called the Shudra life. Or to be more explicit, the uncultured life of the lower class of men. It is stated herein that the governmental power of society in the Kali Yuga will be passed over to the uncultured, godless, laborer classes of men. And thus the Nridevas, or the ministers of the government, will be the Vrishalas, or the uncultured lower class men of society. No one can expect any peace and prosperity in a human society full of uncultured lower classes of men. The symptoms of such uncultured social animals are already in vogue. They're already popular. And it is the duty of the leaders of men to take note of it and try to reform the social order by introducing the principles of twice-born men trained in the science of God consciousness. This can be done by expanding the culture of Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world. In the degraded condition of human society, the Lord incarnates as the Kalki avatar and kills all the demons without mercy. Text 39. Sarge tapokham rishayo na vaye prajesha sthane tadharma makhamanvamaravanishah ante twadharma haramanyu vasha suradya maya vibhutaya ima purushakti bhaja. At the beginning of creation, there are penance, myself, Brahma, and the 9 Prajapatis, the great sages who generate. Then during the maintenance of the creation, there are Lord Vishnu, the demigods with controlling powers, and the kings of different planets. But at the end, there is a religion, and then Lord Shiva and the atheists full of anger, etc. All of them are different representative manifestations of the energy of the supreme power, the Lord. सृष्टि आदि कार्य भेदेन माया गुणावतार विभूति aha. So by presenting the various effects of creation, maintenance, and annihilation, Lord Brahma now talks about the various opulences, talks about Maya, talks about the Gunavataras, talks about the Lord's various opulences. This Manyu Vasha, the eighth is full of anger, etc. That refers to serpents. So there are these serpents, asuras, and so on. Bahushakti Dharinaha, Bhagavata Ima Maya Vibhutayaha. These are all extremely powerful beings. And they are all opulences of the Maya potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Here, Vishnu is referred to here, but that is in his appearance as an upadhi, as the designation for Sattva-guna. Srajami Tanniyuktoham, because 2.6.32 already specified that Lord Brahma is actually employed by Lord Vishnu, and Haro Harati Tadvashaha, and Lord Hara or Rudra, he does the work of destruction under the control of Lord Vishnu. And Lord Vishnu, he does the act of protection himself. The material world is created by the energy of the Lord, which is manifested in the beginning of the creation by the penance of Brahmaji, the first living being in the creation. And then there are the 9 Prajapatis known as great sages. In the stage when the creation is maintained, there are devotional service to Lord Vishnu or factual religion, the different demigods and the kings of different planets who maintain the world. At last, when the creation is preparing to wind up, there is first the principle of the religion, then Lord Shiva along with the atheists, full of anger. But all of them are but different manifestations of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahadeva, Shiva are different incarnations of the different modes of material nature. Vishnu is the Lord of the mode of goodness. Brahma is the Lord of the mode of passion. And Shiva is the Lord of the mode of ignorance. Ultimately, the material creation is but a temporary manifestation meant to give the chance of liberation to the contingent souls who are entrapped in the material world and who develops the mode of goodness under the protection of Lord Vishnu. And one who develops the mode of goodness under the protection of Lord Vishnu has the greatest chance of being liberated by following the Vaishnava principles and thus being promoted to the kingdom of God. No more to return to this miserable material world. It's 40. Vishnor nuvirya gananam katamor hatiha yah parthivanyapik aver vimame rajamsi chastam bhayasva rahasa skalata triprishtham yasmat trisamya sadanad urukampa yanam. Who can describe completely the prowess of Vishnu? Even the scientist who might have counted the particles of the atoms of the universe cannot do so, because it is Vishnu only who, in his form of Trivikrama, moved his leg effortlessly beyond the topmost planet Satyaloka up to the neutral state of the 3 modes of material nature. And all planets were moved. This is a paraphrase of a Rigvedic mantra. There is the reference. I think the words will be behind. This is the first. That Chakravarti looks like he has quoted it fully. This is the original mantra. Idam maya sankhepena uktam vistarena vaktum na kopi samartha. I have described this briefly. No one is capable of describing this in full detail. अथ पूर्वपदे विष्णोरपि माया विभूतित्वेन अन्यैः साम्यमाशङ्क्य तन् निरस्याह विष्णोर्नु इति. In the previous verse, uh, it appears that Lord Vishnu is also an opulence of Maya. So, anticipating that some people would come to that conclusion, Lord Brahma now denies that by presenting the current verse. Prakriti Paryanta Kalpanat Tasya tu tat atirikta ananta parameshwaryam asti. Eva. Lord Vishnu's supreme opulence is unlimited and it is also distinct from anything that has been created all the way up to Prakriti. And Lord Brahma does it just by referring to a Rigvedic mantra itself. The highest scientific advancement of the material scientists is atomic energy. But no material scientist is able to count the particles of atoms contained in the whole universe. But even if one were able to count such atomic particles and were able to roll up the sky like one's betting, see this, roll up the sky like one's betting. This comes in the Vedas, in the Shruti. Even then, one would be unable to estimate the extent of the prowess and energy of the Supreme Lord. He is known as Trivikrama because once in his incarnation of Vamana, he expanded his leg beyond the highest planetary system, Satyaloka, and reached the neutral state of the modes of nature called the covering of the material world. There are 7 layers of matter covering the material sky, and the Lord could penetrate even those covering Andagataha. With his toe, he made a hole through which the water of the causal ocean filters into the material sky, and the current is known as the sacred Ganges, which purifies the planets of the 3 worlds. In other words, no one is equal to the transcendently powerful Vishnu. He is omnipotent, and no one is equal to or greater than him. Chat. Offering respects to religious teachers means, what is offering respect to religious teachers? Where does that come? Where does that come?
Acharyopasanam.
Acharya Upasanam. One should surrender to the great Acharyas who teach us to surrender to Lord Vishnu. Adav Guru Padashrayam. Same thing. Please give some example of asuras who recognize aloud while being killed. Vishnu Purana talks about Shishupala. Shishupala. Dantavakra. Just at the moment of death. Recognized the Lord's position. Text 41. Nantam vidamyaham manayograjaste maya balasya purushasya kuto varayye gayan gunandasha shatanana adideva sheshodhunapi samavasyati nasya param. Neither I nor all the sages born before you know fully the omnipotent personality of Godhead. So what can others who are born after us know about him? Even the first incarnation of the Lord, namely Shesha, has not been able to reach the limit of such knowledge. Although he's describing the qualities of the Lord with 1,000 mouths. This is an elaboration of the previous verse. Tatra mayika, amayikattvena, ubhayavidhanam api viryanam, anantyamaha. In the first half of this verse, according to Jiva Goswami, Lord Brahma points out that the prowess of Lord Vishnu, both his prowess in the sphere of Maya and in the sphere beyond Maya, both of the two types of prowess is unlimited. So if Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says, if the potency of Maya, the strength of the Maya Shakti of this Supreme Person has no end, if I do not see any end to it, what would be the situation with his spiritual potency? That is implied here. The omnipotent personality of Godhead has primarily three potencies, namely the internal, external, and marginal potencies with unlimited expansions of these three energies. As such, the expansions of these potencies can never be calculated by anyone. Indeed, even the personality of God himself, as incarnation of Shesha, cannot estimate these potencies, although he has been describing them continuously with his 1,000 mouths. It's 42. Yesham sa esha bhagavan dayedananta sarvatmanashritapado yadinirvyalīkam te dustaram atitaranti cha deva mayam naisham amaham iti dhi swasrigala bhakshye. But anyone who is specifically favored by the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, due to unalloyed surrender unto the service of the Lord, can overcome the insurmountable ocean of illusion and can understand the Lord. But those who are attached to this body, which is meant to be eaten at the end by dogs and jackals, cannot do so. Yadi na kepi vidanti, tarhi katham uchyeran. If they do not know about the Lord's truth, how can they be delivered? Anticipating that, he says, Tat rupayaiva ityahat yeshamiti. It is simply by his mercy that they can be delivered. Dayaye, dayam kuryat. If the Supreme Lord is merciful to someone, if he specifically favors someone, yadi nirvyalikam nishkapatam ashita charanaha bhavanti. Charanaha bhavanti. Those who non-duplicitously take shelter of him, they are the ones who will cross over this insurmountable Maya potency of the Supreme Lord. There's a word cha here. Where is that? Cha. So they can overcome this insurmountable Deva Maya, and they can also understand the opulence of this Maya. Nanu, yadi Vishmadayopi tam na vidanti, tarhi tad anubhavaha nirashya eva abhut. If even Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, he anticipates this question. If even you, persons like you don't know him, then experience of this being is baseless. It's not going to produce any effect. Mam iti janantu iti sakranam angikuryat. If the Supreme Lord himself accepts, let these people understand me, and he thinks like that in a merciful manner, then it is possible. And he refers to this famous Katha text. The Supreme Atma, he cannot be attained through lectures, through speech, cannot be attained through one's intelligence, cannot be attained through a lot of learning. He can be attained by him who has been chosen by the Lord. It's only for that person the Supreme Lord reveals his own form. Kena lakshanena tasya daya gyatavya. So, what kind of mercy should be understood to be being referred to here? Yataha sarvatmana ज्ञानकर्मादि निरपेक्षतया निर्व्यलीकं निष्कपटं निष्कामम् इति यावत् आश्रितपदः आश्रितभगवच्चरणा यदि भवन्ति. If they take shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead non-duplicitously, which means they have no desire for anything other than to please the Lord, while being indifferent to jnana, karma, anyavilashita, and so on. दया शक्तिरेव मुख्या वृत्ति शुद्ध भक्ति. The prime manifestation of the Supreme Lord's mercy potency is Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotion service to him. Sacha tad bhakta dvaraiva janeshu pravartate iti bhava. The implication is that Shuddha Bhakti is present amongst people through his devotees. His devotees have to spread it out to others. Kena lakshanena maya tarana tad vedane gyatavye. And through what symptoms do we understand that the process of crossing over Maya and understanding that Krishnigala Bhakshe Putradidehe Swadehe Cha Esha Mava Ham Iti Dhir Nasya, when one no longer has the conception that one's son and other bodies, which are meant to be eaten by dogs, jackals, and one's own body, then one does not consider these to be belonging to me, or one does not consider that this is what I am. Then from that we understand that this person has crossed over Maya. He has understood the nature of Maya. Unalloyed devotees of the Lord know the glories of the Lord in the sense that they can understand how great the Lord is and how great is his expansion of diverse energy. Those who are attached to the perishable body can hardly enter into the realm of the science of Godhead. The whole materialistic world, based on the conception of the material body as a self, is ignorant of the science of God. The materialist is always busy working for the welfare of the material body, not only his own, but also those of his children, kinsmen, community men, countrymen, etc. The materialists have many branches of philanthropic and altruistic activities from a political, national, and international angle of vision. But none of the field work can go beyond the jurisdiction of the misconception of identifying the material body with the spirit soul. Unless, therefore, one is saved from the wrong conception of the body and soul, body and the soul, there is no knowledge of Godhead. And unless there is knowledge of God, all advancement of material civilization, however dazzling, should be considered a failure. Text 43 to 45. Vedaham anga paramasya hi yogamayam yujam bhavasya bhagavan atha daityavarya Patni mano sacha manushya tatatmajascha prachina barhiribhur anga uta bhuvascha Ikshvakuraila muchukunda videha gadhir raghvambarisha sagara Gayanakushadhyah Mandhatralar Kashtapathan Vanti Deva Devavrato Balir Amurta Rayo Dilipa Saubharyo Tanka Shibi Devala Pipalada Sarasvatodhava Parashara Bhuri Shena Yenye Vibhishana Hanumat Upendra Datta Partharshti Shena Vidura Shrutadeva Varya on Narada. Although the potencies of the Lord are unknowable and immeasurable, I still know how he acts through his Yogamaya potencies. And similarly, the potencies of the Lord are also known to you, to the all-powerful Shiva, to the great king of the atheist family, namely Prahlad Maharaj, to Swayambhuva Manu, his wife Shatarupa, and his sons and daughters, namely Priyavrata, Uttanapada, Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti, to Prachina Barhi, Ribhu, and Anga, the father of Vena, and to Maharaj Dhruva, Ikshvaku, Aila, Muchikunda, Maharaj Janaka, Gadhi, Raghu, Ambarisha, Sagara, Gaya, Nahusha, Mandhata, Alarka, Shatadhanu, Anu, Rantideva, Bhishma, Bali, Amurtaraya, Dilipa, Saubhari, Utanka, Shibi, Devala, Pipalada, Saraswata, Uddhava, Parashara, Bhuri Shena, Vibhishana, Hanuman, Yudeva Goswami, Arjuna, Ashtishena, Vidura, Shrutadeva, etc. Because we are all surrendered souls, we know how the Lord acts through his potencies. Antarjnana bhavepi Mayayam iti jnanam tat kripaya bhuknam asti ityaha vedaham iti tripish. Even in the absence of internal realization, the knowledge that this is Maya is found in many by his mercy. The potencies of the Lord are also known to you. And he uses the word yuyam, which indicates that the four Kumaras have to be included here. Known to you, meaning you as well as the four Kumaras. Vibhishana, where is Vibhishana? Vibhishana. Tatra ahikarinam udaharati. Now, this is a list of authorities in the subject matter of the giving up, the imposition of the illusory potency. We are all imposed, the Maya potency has imposed her effect on us. So to get rid of that, we need to follow in the footsteps of certain authorities who have come to that point. Those authorities are enlisted here. Swadhikara anurupam aham anyepi vidma. According to our individual eligibilities, tad daya avatarata samyena. In correspondence to the amount of mercy that has been received, according to the amount of eligibility, we know. There's something wrong with this. 1 minute. Try start. What is the current verse? 2.7. Taratamiya. ननु त एव निर्रहं ममत्वाश्चके येषु भगवतो दयालक्षणं दृष्टं द्रष्टव्यं चेति तान् गमयति तेराहम् अन्येति. Krishna Chakravarti Thakur states that Lord Brahma also anticipates this question. So those who have this feeling of it is mine and it is I, with regard to the bodies of his children and so on, and his own bodies and his own body, they do not cross over the Maya potency of the Lord. So, but who are the ones who are free from this aham mama, this idea that I am this body and that my son's body and so on, they belong to me, I'm related to them. Who are the ones who have who have gone beyond these conceptions? Because we understand that these persons would have received the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So they would be characterized by that compassion of the Supreme Lord, characterized by a receipt of the compassion of the Supreme Lord. And these are the ones who we need to look out for. So then he says, he gives a list out here. We are all the persons who have understood. Mayi bhagavato daya asti iti janami. Iti tad abhigya bhaktajana sammata yaiva vachmi. All the devotees who are aware that they have received the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they have approved, and therefore I am speaking this. Svanubhavastu nantam vidamiti maya purumeva prakashitam iti bhava. The implication is, my personal experience is that I don't know the end of the Lord's potencies. That I have already spelled out. But at least I have understood this much, I and the others mentioned here. All the great devotees of the Lord mentioned above, who flourished in the past or flourish in the present, and all the devotees of the Lord who will come in the future are aware of the different potencies of the Lord, including the potencies of his name, qualities, pastimes, entourage, personality, etc. How do they know? Certainly it is not by mental speculation, nor by any attempt by dint of limited instruments of knowledge. By the limited instruments of knowledge, either the senses or the material instruments like microscopes and telescopes, one cannot even fully know the Lord's material potencies which are manifested before our eyes. For example, the greatest scientists of the world are trying to reach the moon, the nearest of the planets. Prabhupada uses the word planet to refer to heavenly bodies. But they have no ascertainable clue as to how to reach it. There are many millions and billions of other planets, far, far beyond the scientist's calculation. But these are only the manifestations of the Lord's material energy. What can the scientist hope to know of the spiritual potency of the Lord if spiritual potency of the Lord by such material efforts? Mental speculations by adding some dozens of ifs and maybes cannot aid the advancement of knowledge. On the contrary, such mental speculations will only end in despair by dismissing the case abruptly and declaring the non-existence of God. The sane person, therefore, ceases to speculate on subjects beyond the jurisdiction of his tiny brain, and as a matter of course, he tries to learn to surrender unto the Supreme Lord, who alone can lead one to the platform of real knowledge. In the Upanishads, it is clearly said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead can never be known simply by working very hard and taxing the good brain, nor can he be known simply by mental speculation and jugglery of words. The Lord is knowable only by one who is a surrendered soul. Herein, Brahmaji, the greatest of all material living beings, acknowledges this truth. Therefore, the fruitless spoiling of energy by pursuing the path of experimental knowledge must be given up. One should gain knowledge by surrendering unto the Lord and by acknowledging the authority of the persons mentioned here. The Lord is unlimited, and by the grace of the Yogamaya, helps the surrendered soul to know him proportionately with the advance of one's surrender. 46. Te vai vidantyatitaranti cha devamayam stri shudra hona shabrapi papa jiva yad bhuta krama parayana shila shikshas tiryad jana api himushuta dharanaye. Surrendered souls, even from groups leading sinful lives such as women, the laborer class, the mountaineers, and the shabaras, or even the birds and beasts, can also know about the signs of Godhead and become liberated from the clutches of the illusory energy by surrendering unto the pure devotees of the Lord and by following in their footsteps in devotional service. In Bhavna, what more needs to be said? Satsangena sarvepi vidanti ityaha. By associating with saintly authorities, everybody can know about the Supreme Lord. Shuddha Dharana, Brahmana. Shuddha Dharana refers to the Brahmanas. Sometimes the word Shubha Dharana appears, in which case it refers to those who have disciplined their minds to engage in dharana on the auspicious transcendental form of the Supreme Personality of God. Jana api. Even those who are not human beings. That means even subhumans. They also. So from that we understand that regarding eligibility to engage in bhakti, there is no consideration like for karma, jnana, yoga. There are no regulations pertaining to birth and so on. It is a fact that if one wants to attain dharmartha kama, birth is a factor. If one wants to attain moksha, to a smaller extent, birth is a factor. But if one wants to attain pure love of Krishna, simply wants to satisfy the Supreme Lord, then birth is not a factor. न केवलम एते महाते एव अपितु दीनहीना apityaha. It's not only these great souls, but even the fallen, wretched people, even they get to know, understand, and realize the nature of the Supreme Lord. Sometimes there are inquiries as to how one can surrender unto the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 18.66, the Lord asked Arjuna to surrender unto him, and therefore persons unwilling to do so question where God is and to whom they should surrender. The answer to such questions or inquiries is given herein very properly. The personality of Godhead may not be present before one's eyes, but if one is sincere in wanting such guidance, the Lord will send a bona fide person who can guide one properly back home, back to Godhead. There is no need of material qualifications for making progress on the path of spiritual realization. In the material world, when one accepts some particular type of service, he is required to possess some particular type of qualification also. Without this, one is unfit for such service. But in the devotion service of the Lord, the only qualification required is surrender. Surrendering oneself is in one's own hand. If one likes, he can surrender immediately without delay, and that begins his spiritual life. The bona fide representative of God is as good as God himself. Or in other words, the loving representative of the Lord is more kind and more easy to approach. A sinful soul cannot approach the Lord directly, but such a sinful man can very easily approach a pure devotee of the Lord. And if one agrees to put himself under the guidance of such a devotee of the Lord, he can also understand the signs of God and can also become like the transcendental pure devotee of the Lord and thus get his liberation back to Godhead, back home for eternal happiness. So realization of the signs of Godhead and relief from the unnecessary useless struggle for existence are not at all difficult for the willing candidate. But they are very difficult for persons who are not surrendered souls, but who simply speculate without any profit. Okay, so I'll stop with that. Anchaya Gudru Yashika Pasandu Keva Chapatanam Bhavane Kyo Vaishnav Kyo Namo Namaha